This interview we recorded recently, it does follow a concern expressed to me by a very avid Outsiders watcher, Tony Lowy, and his wife Eva. And Tony, one of the children of David, did say to me at one stage, I think there may be a bit too much Jewish and Israeli content in your show. And I said, well, why do you say that? And I'll just read a bit. He said, I think so. He said, we Jews are paranoid about being too pushy and conspicuous. I'm sure that if you and Rowan were Jewish, you would have been a bit less vocal about the Middle East and Israel, fearing the backlash that may follow from usual suspects. I do suggest you tone down, even though we're really proud of your combined outspokenness for Israel, the history of the Jewish people. Kind regards, Tony. So therefore...
So I think what we should do...
we decided this, we're dedicating this interview with Yishai Fleisher, who is a broadcaster, who is the voice of Hebron, who is a settler. Who insists on the right of
destroying the world, planet,
to live in the West Bank, and I just want to.
In other words, a bloke who wants to live in his home.
Who wants to live in his home.
That's it.
The thing that I would say before we go to the interview is that you will find no community in the world with a greater diversity of opinion within the same family as among the Jews. And so you will find, for example, believing Jews who are leading the campaign against permissiveness in Hollywood, and then you will find Jews who are writing, directing and producing and financing the programs in Hollywood. You will find Jews who are hardcore right-wingers in the Likud, for example, and you will find Jews, most American Jews voted for...
Screaming lefty lovies.
Hillary Clinton, screaming lefty lovies. You will find, and I find this most extraordinary, that when Ahmadinejad, then president of Iran, held a anti-Zionist Holocaust questioning conference in Tehran, it was attended by a group of Hasidic Jews. And these Hasidic Jews said, well, look, we don't believe in Zionism. We think Zionism is part of the problem. And then you will find, Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka actually converts to Judaism, not least because she loves the idea of the Sabbath and for 25 hours a week completely free of electronic devices. So what you find is this unbelievable diversity of opinion.
Genuine diversity. Don't tell the ABC.
And you will find in the Israeli media, it's the only really vibrant source of contested views anywhere in the Middle East. Indeed, it outperforms the Australian media for genuine diversity of opinion. So in honour of the diversity of views within Jews, from even the Hasidics who attended the anti-Zionist conference in Tehran, this interview with Yishai Fleisher, the broadcasting voice of Hebron, the rabbi settler. Sit back and enjoy.
Take it away. And I'm delighted to welcome two outsiders, an outsider himself, Yishai Fleisher, from Hebron in Israel, officially a settler. So definitely on the outside. Tell us all about Hebron, but also welcome to Australia, and how have you found Australia, Yishai?
Australia is beautiful.
Good.
Okay, very beautiful. I saw Perth, I saw the Indian Ocean.
Excellent.
I went to Melbourne, was very impressive actually, a great city. Yeah. New, shiny, fast, beautiful. And Sydney, of course, the harbour.
And we'll get into Hebron, but what do you make of the fact that Australia boycotted the opening of the American embassy, moving it to Jerusalem, West Jerusalem? What do you make of that?
There's a lot of countries that didn't show up at that party, and when it comes to Australia, you have to think to yourself, who are they lining up with? Who's Australia kind of going to lean on? Is it going to say, I want to be like what? Like France, like England, like Spain? Like who are you kind of, which coattails are you riding? You're not a giant country. And who are you going to follow? Here's President Trump, and he's saying something so simple. He says it's time to recognize the obvious. Guess what? Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Just put your embassy there. Like, are we doubting your capital? Is that right?
Well, without going into Australian politics, we did have a leader, Tony Abbott, who came out and said the Australian embassy should move to West Jerusalem. But we have Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop saying, Ross, that they want to boycott it.
Malcolm Turnbull, I find it was a bit like he's blackjack, he's like he fails, he gets it right. He fails, he gets it right. He's basically a 50-50 proposition. But Yishai, That means Jesse, King David, son of Jesse. Was there a tribe? Is there a tribe of Jesse among the 12 tribes or not?
They are among the princesses of the tribe of Judah. Okay, Judah is Hebron, Judah is Bethlehem, Judah is Beersheba, Judah is Gaza, actually. Okay, so all those are in the tribe of Judah. It was one of the big tribes and the most important tribe. And King David emerged as the important king, the first king of the tribe of Judah. Afterwards, his son Solomon, etc.
So you are both a lawyer and a rabbi. To give us the maths of the demography of Hebron, of who is there.
All right, maybe we should click one zoom back and look at what is Judea and Samaria, the quote-unquote West Bank. It's an area that is north and south of Jerusalem. It's an area that is to the west of the Jordan River, okay? It's a mountainous region mostly, and that region is where basically the Jewish story, the biblical story, all took place. So that's Hebron, that's Bethlehem, that's Bethel. Okay, all these names that you kind of grew up with and you heard from your parents. Biblical names. They're there. Yeah. They're still there. Now, in the 20s, this land was allocated to the Jewish people to establish a Jewish state. Then the British cut away a large chunk of that land and created the Transjordan, okay? And they kind of did a favor to their Arab friends from Saudi Arabia and made them kings over there.
Transjordan isn't transgender, just if you're getting confused there, Ross. I know.
I don't know how I would make it to work without your guidance, brother. Yeah, keep going.
So
Transjordan, and then it became later Jordan. And then in 1948, Israel announced that it's a state. Hello, we're a state. Happy birthday. At that moment, many Arab armies gathered to destroy Israel, to finish off the work of the Holocaust. But it was not to be, and we won independence. We beat them back. But we lost a huge chunk of land called the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria. That is, again, the heartland of the homeland, okay? This area was under Jordanian occupation for 19 years. And then in 1967, in what can be seen as the continuation of the War of Independence, we won that land back. We took it back. We liberated it, if you will, okay? I'm always asking, is it liberation or occupation? There's a lot of Arabs that live in that area that Jordan pushed in there, and other people, and there's a lot of Arabs that live there, maybe around 2 million. And there's right now about 400,000 quote-unquote settlers, Jews who have decided to live in these parts with a lot of Arabs, that the state of Israel hasn't yet totally officially recognized as part of Israel, because these people believe, the settlers, that we have every right to this land, we should hold on to this land, and they're trying to push Israeli policy towards full annexation, okay?
Right, well, if you listen to the kind of the Barack Obama, we have a bloke in Australia called Bob Carr, if you listen to them, settlements are the single biggest impediment to peace in the Middle East. I find that a fairly ludicrous proposition. I think there are plenty of others. But explain to us, with the settlements, is that an obstacle to peace, as it is always presented as such?
Okay, first thing, the Middle East is riddled with jihadism. Yes. Okay, that jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims. Yeah. Okay, for example, the Kurds are constantly victims of Iranian jihad, ISIS jihad, Turkish jihad. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. Everybody wants to crush their fellow Muslims because they're not exactly like them. There's an internal fight between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It's a war of different kinds of jihad. There's a war within Egypt. There's a war in East Africa. There's an endless war in their world because of an ideology of hate and of subjugation that world has right now, sadly. There are 350 million Arabs. There's 6.5 million Jews. And there's only two kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed. Okay? The armed minorities are the Kurds, the Jews. We hold on. We are strong because we push back on the jihad. The unarmed minorities, like the Christians, like the Yazidis, like the Copts in Egypt, they get pushed around. They get decimated and they get destroyed because they don't know how to fight back. The settlements is one of the rationales. See, what happens is that the jihad, and generally the left associated with the jihad, likes to come up with a reason to blame the victim. And in this case, they want to say that the Jews that live in these parts, they're the cause of all the problems. But there was wars against Israel before we were in Judea and Samaria, right? They were trying to annihilate us before we were in these parts. They have a problem with us being there for a religious reason. They don't like the idea of Jewish sovereignty in what they perceive as their area. And they cause war for that.
What is the solution from your, as a settler, as a combatant in the fight? What's the perfect resolution?
Russ, before we go to solution, we've got to figure out what is not the solution, because we've been told for a long time what is the solution.
The two-state solution.
That's right. We've been told that it's
the two-state solution has never worked.
Right.
So what can work in its place? You wrote a very perceptive article, got a lot of hits on YouTube and a lot of hits, which was about in the New York Times about 5 alternative solutions to the two-state solution. Talk us through those.
Okay, I will, but a lot of your audience doesn't even know yet why it's bad, because the two-state solution, maybe it sounds good, it's rational, just give up a little bit and it's going to be good. Give a little bit to the jihad and they'll be placated and then we'll have peace. By the way, I met with a Kurd recently. I said to him, you know what your problem is? If you would just give up a little bit more of your land to the jihad around you, you'll have peace. And we laughed and laughed and laughed, okay?
Because it's being demanded of you.
Right.
Yes.
But we laughed because as Middle Easterners, we realized how absurd that is, And basically, if I have a conversation with Arabs all the time, I've compacted it into one conversation. I say to Arabs, I say to them, Allah loves you. He's given you 22 countries. He's given you 350 million people. He's given you oil coming out of the ground. But he loves us. And he's given us this small land. It's in your Quran. And we've only beaten you, not because we're bigger than you, not because we're stronger than you, but because Allah wills it. And I told them, submit to the will of Allah. Be a good Muslim.
How's that play?
Check this out. And this is what happens.
We might wander down to Lakembra and give that a bit of a run. Give that a whirl. But tell us your 5.
Rowan, check this out. This is what happens when you say this in Arab. He says to you, he says, He goes, you're right. But you have left the Sinai. You have left South Lebanon. You have left Gaza. You have left parts of Judea and Samaria. You're shrinking. You're shrinking, and we are patient. Allah is with us. You're getting smaller and smaller, and we'll defeat you in the end. Once you understand that psychology, now you understand the Middle East.
That's the mentality, yeah.
Okay? So now comes the right wing, and it says, listen, the only way to have quote-unquote peace, although that's not what I'm for. I'm not for peace. I'm for respect. Yeah. I'm for deterrence. Yeah. I'm for you will know I'm here, and we can have inter-Semitic cooperation on the basis of respect, not on the basis of peace. You'll respect me. Yeah. That's the way to make it in the Middle East. And so we said we have to hold on to our land. We have to be big. Right? In America, they say, go big or go home, right? You have to be big. And you got to hold on strong. And the way we're going to do it is by holding on to our land, but somehow giving as many rights as possible to that group of people that live amongst us without endangering our democracy. So option number 1 that I wrote in the New York Times, option number 1 is that Jordan is Palestine. Guess what? The British already created a two-state solution. In the 1920s, they cut away the land that was supposed to be ours and they gave it to their Arab friends. That country today is 80% Palestinian. Okay, the king had to marry. He had to marry a Palestinian lady in order to kind of placate his populace. So therefore,
that's Jordan.
Jordan,
is Palestine.
Jordan is Palestine. 1984.
And there's a river to separate what could be Israel and Palestine.
But that doesn't mean we have to kick everybody out from Judea and Samaria to Jordan. They'll vote in Jordan and be residents in Israel. Right. Okay, and everybody's happy. So you can have the vote, but still remain as a resident, and we will annex you. You will be our resident, but we don't have to kick you out. But you won't claim that this land is Palestine.
Are there any other places in the world where that sort of idea works or has been seen to work?
Well, it actually worked in Jordan itself. Until 1984, these people that lived in the West Bank had a Jordanian citizenship. Right. One day, the Jordanian king decided, willy-nilly, that he's taking that away. They woke up stateless. We say let them be reinstated.
Okay.
There is quite a body of opinion that the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan is sort of on its last legs, that it cannot sustain itself. What's your view?
It's a colonialist holdover. It's a totally artificial kingdom. And of course, if it wasn't for the West that defends it, and for Israel, everybody knows in Israel that there's like a unspoken secret that it's Israel that defends the Hashemite kingdom from falling down to ISIS and to other forces.
So what were your other two?
We've got 4 more to get through.
We'll do it fast. We'll do it fast, but we'll understand it. Here we go. Option number 2 is what Naftali Bennett, Minister Naftali Bennett, says. He was here 2 years ago in Australia. He says, look, annex Area C. That's where the Jews live. 400,000 Jews live there, 40,000 Arabs. Annex Area C. I don't know about the other parts, but let's take what we got now and say this is part of normative Israel. That's option number 2. Take the next natural step. We'll worry about the other areas later.
So what does that include?
That includes Hebron and Bethlehem and Bethel and big cities like Ariel and Ma'ale Adumim.
And this, and just to go briefly back last year or the year before, when the United Nations actually came out and said that the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron was an Islamic ancient historic monument, nothing to do with the Jews or something like that. You've got a big struggle on your hands to convince the UN to go with that option. Or probably any option.
The UN is itself, I'm sure you talk about it on this show and The Outsiders, what the problem of the UN is in general, but you basically have a body that wants to deny Jewish history. It's really a narrative tool. I call it a narrative warfare. These guys are narrative combatants, and they want to erase Jewish history, and they want to say that the building in Hebron, which is a 2,000-year-old Jewish building built by King Herod, on top of tombs that are 3,800 years old, Jewish tombs, is actually a Palestinian heritage site.
Well, I would argue, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that Australia defatted our Foreign Affairs Department by boycotting the opening of the embassy is also trying to deny Jewish history for precisely the same reason and motives. That's my own opinion. But let's rip into your other ideas.
You're saying something very powerful. You're saying something very powerful. But guess what? Even our great friend America has done that for a very long time. It was America
and
that
Donald
did not
Trump
who
stepped forward and said we must do this.
So we're in a process now. Let's not give Australia too hard of a time. It's time to, you can do whatever you want. You're Australian. For me, I'm recognizing now that there's a process. We will get the Australian embassy to move to Jerusalem. It will happen. It's just a matter of time.
The right Prime Minister, and you will have, yeah.
That's right.
If we go to the UN, can the UN be rehabilitated? Can it be, is it on balance a useful institution, or is it cultural baggage that we would be better off without?
Empowering very undemocratic countries to have equal vote with countries that are democratic, it seems to me, has failed. Basically, it's an organization that was created in order to stop the Holocaust from happening again, and it's the facilitator of it. It's the mouthpiece of the jihad. I don't see it being a great success. And I would even say to President Trump, I would say to him, you've spoken a lot about the problem of the UN. America's the #1 funder of the UN. It sits in New York City. It's time to
defund it. Absolutely, right. We should not be funding it.
The next clean up the swamp is the swamp at the UN.
That's right. Okay, let's go through your other solutions. We've done 2 of them.
Yes, we've done 2 of them. We'll finish off quick. Number 3 is a great professor in Israel named Mordechai Kedar. Kedar says, listen, let them have self-rule in small places in their cities, because truthfully, they're not one people. They're basically clannish. We think of them as one people because that's what we've been told. Truth is that they're much more clan-like. The Arabs in Jenin do not marry the Arabs in Hebron. We shall annex, but give them self-rule in their small areas in their cities, and that way they can have their own kind of sense of belonging, but they will be under the rubric of the State of Israel. That's number 3. Number 4 is very important. Number 4 basically says, listen, this is the most plain one of them all. It says, we will annex Judea and Samaria. We will give them residency, okay, and a pathway to citizenship for those people who swear loyalty to the Jewish state. Yeah. Yes, there's a small Semitic Jewish state. It's your cousins, it's your brothers. You don't like them, go somewhere else. You can deal with them, you can swear allegiance, and you can live amongst us, no problem. So pathway to citizenship after getting residency. I think that's the most sensical. Option number 5.
And no dual citizens. I think we're getting that idea. Right. Yep.
I don't. This is some inner Australian politics.
Australian.
All right. Option number 5 says, listen, maybe we can't. Maybe we need a divorce, and maybe we need a separation of peoples. Maybe we need to go like. Greece and Turkey and India and Pakistan. We need to kind of separate these nations out. But here I'm going to say something very moving. Let me wax emotional for a second. In 1919, there was actually a beautiful peace idea that was trumpeted by the Arabs. There was a great Arab leader at the time. His name was Emir Faisal. And he met with Chaim Weizmann, the head of the Zionist movement. And he said to him, my brother, welcome. We welcome you. We welcome our Jewish brothers. This is your land. It says so in the Quran, he wrote. He says, the more educated amongst us know that you have every right to this land. Here's how it's going to look like. You're going to have a strong Jewish state, and we're going to have strong Arab states, and we're going to grow together. We're going to rise up together as a Semitic union, a Semitic area. That was the vision. Sadly, he did not win the day, and the jihad won the day. The jihad uses all kinds of tricks to shrink Israel. Even it could be diplomacy, it could be peace, it could be war. Shrink Israel to try to annihilate. They don't want peace. They want rest in peace.
Well, Yishai Fleisher, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. You've you put forward 5 solutions to the alternatives to the 2-state solution, which is fantastic. Lots for us to think about. Glad you're enjoying Australia and have done a great job of selling Israel and Hebron. Can't wait to go there. Thanks.
You do that. Come to the mothers and the fathers. They're waiting for you.
Look forward to it. Thank you.